Emily Crane was most likely born in the late 2000s decade as the daughter of two prominent circus performers who came from a long line of very popular mimes and circus people. In this newspaper article, it says that she was 10 years old when she lost her life one Halloween night, which was on a Friday. From this, we can assume that she became a victim of Art the Clown during the Miles County Massacre, which also took place on a Halloween on a Friday, something that typically only happens once per decade. The bottom of the article says, it's suspected that her death may be connected to a series, which would make sense if it was saying a series of murders committed by the Miles County Clown this past Halloween. In any event, Emily was last seen at the carnival, but her family grew concerned and put together a search party as it started getting late. According to the article, Crane's lifeless, mangled body was discovered in a makeup trailer just outside the main event grounds, which is incredibly detailed for a local newspaper obituary. Usually these things just say she was deceased or something. I guess we shouldn't be surprised by the unsettling details though. The article is written by a member of the Torrance family.
I'm outlining a new writing project.
The Pale Girl is a character shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions, but using a few clues left behind by the director, we can demystify almost everything about her elusive history. To learn how Art's adorably abhorrent associate may be more important than the clown himself, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Horror History. Now that I've done episodes on the Pale Man and the Pale Lady, of course I was gonna cover the Pale Child. You put them together and they make the perfect little pale family, even if they all come from different franchises and have nothing to do with each other. The horror genre's really keeping big sunscreen in business. Emily Crane, later known as just the Pale Little Girl, is a character who appeared in Terrifier 2 without any explanation and disappeared just as quietly before the third installment. But her presence can still be felt in the later entries if you understand her significance to the story. The Pale Little Girl wears a costume similar to that of Art, but the colors are inverted. This was not always the case though. Director Damien Leone initially imagined her as a 1960s girl in a yellow dress and flowers in her hair.
The year before we started shooting, so Halloween of 2017, I remember being on Instagram and getting tagged by tons of fans, and I remember seeing all these female cosplays as Art the Clown, and I said, I have to jump on that before it's too late. It's too good.
But there are little flourishes that make her more than just the female Art, most notably her icy blue eyes that glow yellow during moments of interaction with the two protagonists, Sienna Shaw and her younger brother, Jonathan. But to understand what's going on between Art's surrogate daughter and his arch nemesis, we've got to take it back to the moment Emily Crane crossed over into the supernatural. To start off, let's talk about the timeline. Since the release of Terrifier 3, my old trick of using weekdays to determine the year no longer works. Terrifier 1 contains either a Friday or Saturday, November 1st, and Terrifier 3 contains Thursday, December 21st. Given that we know that the first and third movies are 6 years apart, there's no way to make both of these dates true. The weekdays are clearly just not a consideration. In Terrifier 2, Jonathan is 12 years old, but in Terrifier 3 he's in college, which would imply that 6 years have gone by. But the title card suggests that the prologue, set in the present, is set 5 years after the end of Terrifier 2. Then, this true crime podcaster Mia says it actually hasn't even been 5 years yet.
No rush or anything, but I do know the 5-year anniversary is coming up, and the fan base is rabid.
They intentionally avoid showing the current year on any cell phones or calendars. The best I can do is just explain everything in relation to the Miles County Massacre. So, operating under my theory that Emily was a victim of Art on the same night of the Miles County Massacre, she was probably abducted at the same carnival that Art would eventually turn into his base of operations, which is known by the characters as the Old Carnival.
There's some kind of connection between her, the Old Carnival, and the Miles County Clown.
This place holds a special significance. It's the location of the Terrifier, a carnival haunt that contains a feature Leone calls the Hellportal. In fact, according to Leone, the carnival attraction was built on top of the existing Hellportal.
Not only will Terrifier be just sort of an arbitrary name of this funhouse, but it will play a crucial role. It will be the structure that's built upon the Hellportal.
By the way, you'll see me use these snippets from Leone's commentary track on Terrifier 2. Normally when I analyze a movie, I prefer to let the content of a film speak for itself, and don't consider out-of-universe comments to be canon. But because Leone's comments match up really well with the analysis that I already did in my Art the Clown horror history, and basically just take those ideas half a step further, I'm not gonna lose much sleep over using these quotes. The story goes that Leone was running on 3 hours of sleep when he recorded the track the night before the US premiere, and accidentally said more than he wanted to. It's probably just a marketing tactic for the Blu-ray release, but hey, it's kinda juicy. In my art video, I pointed out this area, where Sienna, who is dressed as a warrior angel for Halloween, is knocked down by Art, putting her in a limbo between the heavenly light beams above and the hellish red glow below. And this area is important when it comes to understanding why the pale girl looks so much like art. Leone refers to this area between the heavenly beams and the hellish glow as the crypt.
We've gone down another layer, and now we're in what I call the crypt. And within this environment is this hell portal.
Art is clearly connected to this hell portal because long before the events of Terrifier and Terrifier 2, Sienna and Jonathan's father drew these prophetic images of an angel dressed like Sienna beheading a demon. I think it's the same demon from the Ninth Circle. Before Terrifier, Art appeared in a series of short films called The Ninth Circle, Something in the Dark, and the Terrifier short film. The 3 shorts were then compiled into a feature called All Hallows Eve, where a babysitter and 2 kids encounter Art after watching through the 3 videotapes. This itself turns out to be a big videotape. So the events themselves aren't really canon, but at most, maybe the videotape is. Like maybe some amateur filmmaker made this film after having a vision about Art and all of the other horrors depicted in All Hallows Eve. The same way that Mr. Shaw had a vision and decided to draw everything in a sketchbook. Anyway, these sketches drive home the idea that Sienna and Art's battle represents a battle of good versus evil and angel versus demon. But what does any of this have to do with Emily Crane? Well, if Emily was an ordinary girl abducted and killed by a demonic entity who happened to cross over into our world at a carnival, maybe in the afterlife her appearance will be corrupted by the form of the being that killed her. However, Emily Crane is not the only form that the entity takes. During Art's first battle with Sienna, the entity takes the shape of Sienna's mom. It's also shown to have the ability to mimic voices. Because of this, it's likely that the pale little girl is not her true form, but rather, this is a demon with the ability to take many forms, or at least physically take on the appearance of those that Art has killed. And at the end of Art's first big massacre, this pale entity would intervene on Earth for the first time. Art kills himself at the end of Terrifier 1, but some supernatural intervention brings him back. The lights and electronics all go crazy, and an unexplained wind blows through the morgue, despite it being indoors. This could be interpreted as the arrival of the pale entity, showing up to resurrect Art and imbue him with its demonic power. Because nothing supernatural has happened before this moment, assuming that All Hallows Eve is just an obscure work of fiction within the Terrifier universe. So, long story short, the pale entity brings Art back to life, making him immortal and essentially making him a pawn for whatever evil acts it wants to commit. Art goes to the laundromat to clean up, and this is where the pale entity introduces itself to Art for the first time. It starts by shutting down the washers, again messing with electronics, and appears to him in the form of the pale little girl. It's something that Art will recognize because he's the one who killed this girl, but the fact that she looks like him tells him that something otherworldly is occurring. This is how Leone describes her first appearance.
More supernatural activity, so something has forced its way into our world. Here we go, the introduction of the little pale girl, the entity, the apparition, the embodiment of evil that has resurrected Art the Clown.
She then proceeds to shit the floor with a discharge of black fluid. This is basically something that happens to signify the entity taking on a new form, which I'll get back to later, but Leone mentions that it was an homage to The Exorcist, which is significant because that movie also deals with the demon in the form of a little girl. The pale girl touches the spot where his eyes poked out with amusement and starts playing patty cake with him. But notably, she's not visible to a third-party bystander. We don't know what the two get up to over the next year, but one day shy of the first anniversary of the massacre, on October 30th, Sienna has a dream set in the world of this kid's show that she had seen while drifting off to sleep, the Clown Cafe. And this is probably the part of the commentary where Leone felt that he revealed too much. He describes the Clown Cafe scene as a divine test from the good entity.
The forces of good that are wanting to appoint Sienna or anoint her as the chosen one, so to speak, to combat Art. She has to be tested first. If she doesn't approach this in the right way, and if she's not courageous at the end and doesn't decide to fight back against Art, then she will not be the one.
And it's no mistake that she passes this test by retrieving the sword left to her by her father and using it to repel the flames emitted by Art. It's fulfilling the tropes of a chosen hero story, most notably the Sword in the Stone story from Arthurian mythology. Arthurian mythology is a collection of stories about the fictional King Arthur of Britain and his Knights of the Round Table. In one story, Great Britain is left without a king, so a contest is devised. Only the true heir to the throne will be able to pull a magical sword from the stone. The one who succeeds is of course a boy named Arthur, destined to become the king. This trope is common in the fantasy genre, and in most iterations, the hero pulling the sword is being selected by a higher power.
The father was sort of a vessel for that supernatural good that needs to get to Sienna. And he was the one who started getting the visions. He, not understanding why necessarily or what's happening, but he knew he had to get the sword for Sienna. He knew that she was meant for something important.
But wherever there is good, there's evil. Leone briefly alludes to the idea of a balance.
Sienna and Art, they are counterparts. They're on the same journey on opposite sides of the spectrum. It's two different roads leading to the same endpoint.
So if some divine source of good is testing Sienna to see if she's worthy of becoming a chosen hero, then it's likely the same thing has happened on the other side, making the pale entity the higher power recruiting Art for the forces of evil. The Chinese philosophy of yin and yang illustrates the balance of darkness and light, and is illustrated with this black and white swirl symbol. So it's interesting that Art's costume has a similar balance of black and white. Yin cannot exist without yang, and vice versa. The original philosophy is not usually about a battle of good versus evil, but more so a balance of things in nature, like light and shadow, heat and cold, or sleep and wakefulness. The existence of the pale entity and the good entity suggests that there's also a balance of angels and demons in the world of Terrifier. But there may also exist a balance within each side. Art and Emily's costumes are the inverse of one another, right down to the pale girl having white palm buttons to balance out the black ones on Art's uniform, just like the dots in the yin and yang symbol, which represents the idea that the opposite exists within each force. For Art and the pale little girl, maybe they represent life and death, with Art being more of a physical killer and Emily being more of a spectral figure that not everyone can see. And the next appearance of the pale girl illustrates that some things are invisible, even to the Terrifier audience. After the Clown Cafe dream, Art is building some new weapons in his workshop, and the pale girl brings out a TV. Although the cable is destroyed, she's able to tap the top of it to turn it on and watch an interview with Victoria Hayes, the only survivor of the Miles County massacre. This is actually our second time seeing this scene. The first was a flash forward scene in the opening of Terrifier 1, only back then we weren't able to see the pale little girl in it.
Welcome back to the program. If you're just tuning in, I'm sitting here live with the sole survivor of the Miles County massacre.
But now that we're following Sienna, we can see what we couldn't before. There are little differences in the edit for some reason, but the similarities are substantial enough to make it clear that there's supposed to be two perspectives of the same scene. The pale little girl really seems transfixed, but Art kicking in the TV has new context this time. It's almost as if she's reminding him that he better finish the job this time, and he's embarrassed by his failure.
I saw it happen.
The next day, Sienna's younger brother Jonathan is at school, and the pale little girl can be seen roaming around. Eventually, he encounters them and finds the girl cradling a dead possum, which the two disembowel, throw at him, and they abandon it there so that Jonathan gets in trouble. They're keeping him alive so that they can use him to lure in Sienna, but most importantly, Jonathan reveals that he was able to see her, making him the first to do so outside of Art. She stays outside in the van as Art does some, let's just say, trick-or-treating, but Jonathan sees her again later that night and her eyes glow bright yellow. Not long after this, Sienna is dancing at QXT's nightclub, and she too spots the pale girl, who seems to have the ability to warp around the room, but no one else there notices her, so naturally Sienna freaks out. Jonathan comes home to find Art has blown his mother's face off, and the pale little girl shows up there as well, gleefully watching and biting her fingernails as Art chases him upstairs and kidnaps him. She is the one to mimic Jonathan's voice in a call with Sienna.
I'm at the Old Carnival. Eric and Sean left me here. I'm all alone.
And later specifies to meet at the Terrifier. Jonathan eventually wakes up to find the pale little girl at a makeup chair, where she's cut out her eyes and disfigured her face, kind of like Victoria. This may also be a clue about what Emily Crane looked like when the authorities found her, sort of taunting Jonathan, suggesting that he'll end up the same way. When Sienna arrives, Sienna and Art battle to the death in an almost biblical clash of angel versus demon. In the end, Jonathan shoots Art and Sienna passes out. But when she comes to, she sees her mom, not aware that it's another form of the pale entity. Jonathan is the one to realize this, and his warning allows her to see the truth. But before Sienna can react, the pale entity touches her face and seems to transmit a vision of the real Mrs. Shaw getting her head blown off, which also distracts Sienna long enough for Art to abduct Jonathan again. Sienna ultimately gets banished to her own personal hellworld, the Clown Cafe, but escapes and comes back to decapitate Art with her father's sword. But just as she utters, "It's over now," the pale little girl appears again to prove her wrong. She hisses at the Shaw siblings, then holds up Art's detached head to her ear as if it's telling her a secret, which she laughs at before taking on a more serious demeanor. This initially led me to think that Art is the one in charge and she's his helper, but Leone describes it as if she is the one guiding him.
He's being guided by his forces in his way, the embodiment of the pale girl.
Her eyes also glow bright yellow. So it seems like the yellow eyes are something that only happens when she's interacting with the Shaw siblings, who are also the only ones who can see her besides Art. But it's likely that their father also had the ability to see her. Why else would he have saved the article about Emily Crane's death in his sketchbook? Divine power seems to be something that runs in the blood of the Shaw family, and Sienna, just like King Arthur, is unaware of her royal lineage. I've covered a lot of religious horror stories concerning demonic entities on my channel. I would say too much. I actively avoid them, and the topic still ends up coming up all the time. The yellow eyes are a common trait seen on these demons, likely because it's strikingly unnatural and intense, and the moral of many of these stories is not to dabble in the occult or things that don't seem natural. So just remember, yellow eyes equals demon, because it's gonna come up in about 2 seconds. Emily cradles Art's head like a baby and disappears, and they don't see her again. But we do. Victoria Hayes, now an inmate at the Miles County Psychiatric Hospital, gives birth to Art's head and licks it clean. The birthing scene results in a lot of blood being discharged from between her legs, which takes me back to that discharge that happened when we first met the pale girl. So it seems like taking on a new form is almost treated as a new birth for the demon, and that's why this happens. Because the next thing we see when an orderly enters the room is Victoria cackling wildly as her eyes glow yellow to the same effect as the pale little girl.
As you see, the eye has turned yellow and it's glowing, so she is possessed by the pale girl.
The two feed on the orderly's flesh, and Victoria / the little pale girl / the pale entity, I'm just gonna call her Victoria from now on, charges the security guard, who is momentarily distracted by Art's headless body walking down the hall. The two tear the guy's face off before hopping on the subway, where they pose for a picture snapped by a costume fan. When they get to Art's workshop, Victoria seems amused by Art's horn, which makes me think that the childlike demeanor left over from her time impersonating Emily Crane is still in there somewhere. But a more crass adult personality is evident too.
Aw, Vicky. He used to be so hot. Now no one's gonna f you.
Again, it's a lot like the vulgar demon from The Exorcist. She posts up in the bathtub and sits there for 5 years when a demolition crew shows up to inspect the house that they're hiding out in.
It's a rat, kid, not the devil.
Oh, just wait. In Terrifier 3, Victoria spends most of her time fashioning herself a new costume, which ends up being identical to the pale little girl's costume, along with a crown of thorns. According to Christian beliefs, this is the same headwear supposedly worn by Jesus Christ during his crucifixion. Christianity is deeply tied into Arthurian mythology. I am tired of everything being religious horror. This is killing me. Many of the Arthurian tales are focused on the quest to find the Holy Grail, a chalice said to contain the blood of Christ, which they believe grants the user with supernatural powers. In the stories, some of the Knights of the Round Table set out to find the Holy Grail, and their worthiness is often judged by their adherence to Christian values like faith and purity. One knight, Percival, who is known for his innocence and determination, becomes the first to encounter the Grail, but fails to obtain it due to the fact that he's still a young and inexperienced knight when he discovers it. He's known as a seeker of truth, which lines up perfectly with one character, the young and inexperienced little brother, Jonathan. Jonathan, as a seeker of truth, sees the pale entity for what it really is in Terrifier 2 when Sienna cannot. And during the gap between Terrifier 2 and 3, he writes Sienna a letter recognizing that the little girl is a demon. Sienna, we have to destroy the little girl before it's too late. Destroy her because she's inhuman, a demon. Demons try to break into our world, only they can't do it alone. They have to choose a vessel, someone recently deceased who functions as a bridge between worlds. But not just anyone, someone sinister, depraved, the worst kind of evil, like a serial killer. If a demon enters this world in the flesh, a counterpart must be appointed to stop it from becoming too powerful. So with Sienna having so much in common with the hero, Arthur, who pulls the sword and slays the demon, everything clicked for me when I realized that Jonathan is a student at a place called St. Percival's College, and their school mascot is the Knights. Jonathan is Sienna's trusted knight, Percival, who fights alongside Arthur in many of the ancient stories. This makes it likely that Art's name isn't just a reference to his killing a lot of artists and turning his victims' corpses into his own works of art, but also a mockery of his opponent, who shares many traits with the fictional King Arthur. Jonathan's room also contains this chessboard, another reference to a medieval battle, and a battle of black versus white at that. I'm not sure if the placement of the pieces is significant, but it looks like the white queen is about to clash with the black pawn. After the revelation that the evil has returned, Jonathan's uncle comes to pick him up from college, and it seems like his voice is being mimicked by the pale entity again.
Hey, Uncle Greg.
Jonathan, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'll be right there.
This allows them to kidnap the uncle, but it's currently unclear if they get Jonathan. While all of this is going on, Sienna drifts off to sleep. As we know, her dreams have the potential to be more than dreams. The Clown Cafe was a divine test, so it's possible that this dream is some kind of warning. It starts as a memory of the first time her father showed her the completed drawing of the warrior angel character, but then she sees a mysterious blacksmith forging a sword. This blacksmith has a broken mask and sharp teeth, and when it notices her, this Virgin Mary figure pulls on the chain around its neck to hold it back. The vision may represent the good entity holding an evil entity at bay. The evil entity could be the pale entity who now possesses Victoria, or possibly just another demon. The sword that it's forging does not look like Sienna's sword. According to what we know about the balance of good and evil in Terrifier, if Sienna has a magic blade, it's likely that the bad guys will have some unholy equivalent. We have actually seen the demonic blacksmith before in the Ninth Circle, the first short featured in All Hallows Eve. It's about a woman who is abducted by Art at the train station and finds herself trapped with 2 other women in a place that represents the Ninth Circle of Hell. Notably, they're all chained around the neck, just like the demonic blacksmith. At the very beginning of the short, we see someone hammering away in an underground corridor, and there's a quick flash of this sharp-fanged creature in a mask, who looks just like the blacksmith from Sienna's dream. Once Sienna awakes, the pale entity uses more voice mimicry to lure her downstairs, where she's ambushed by Art. They tie her up on a chair across from her Aunt Jessica, and Victoria starts opening all the Christmas presents in front of them. She's sure to take some wholesome family photos, like Art disemboweling Sienna's crucified uncle. She also helps Art orchestrate the death of Aunt Jess while Sienna is forced to watch. Then, she addresses Sienna directly.
Oh, hero savior.
And places the crown directly onto her, very overtly drawing the parallel between her situation and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Everything you love is God. There is no hope. There is no God. Just let go so you can let me in.
The yellow eye seems to transfer into Sienna temporarily, but she resists, and we see it return to Victoria. Sienna's resolve was strong enough to resist being possessed by the demon. Victoria believes that Sienna is trying to stay strong for her little cousin Gabby, so Art gets ready to kill her as well. But Victoria, for some reason, allows Sienna to open her Christmas present first. But this is a trick, and the box is actually just where Sienna was hiding the enchanted sword, which she uses to slash Art and throws the blade directly into Victoria's chest before stabbing her in the throat, then decapitating her. We see the yellow glow fade from Victoria's eye, and within a couple minutes, the body rapidly starts to deteriorate, burning a hole through the living room floor, which eventually collapses into another Hellportal. I see this as the pale entity left with no viable vessel on Earth, so it's returning to the underground, and Gabby falls into this hole that's just been created, ending this chapter on a dark note for Sienna. So is this the end of the pale entity? Maybe, but maybe not. It seems clear that Terrifier will continue to lean on the imagery established in the Ninth Circle as it continues to flesh out its lore. There are plenty of creepy characters to choose from, but something tells me the apparition that appeared as the pale little girl is special, as the one who gave Art his immortality. I've seen a lot of rumors online that the reason that the demon doesn't appear using the pale little girl form in Terrifier 3 is because the actress, Amelie McLean, has aged out of the part. I kind of doubt that's the reason, because she still does convention appearances as the character, and there's so much makeup involved, I'm sure they could get away with it. But I think there is something to be said about giving Terrifier 2 something unique so that it has its own identity. I think people really liked the character, and wouldn't be upset if she joined a growing cast of bad guys in every film, but when I think about some of the long-running horror franchises, the most memorable moments are ones that only happen once, like going into the movie studio in Scream 3, or the presidential masks in Purge Election Year. Compare that to Danielle Harris in Halloween 4 versus Danielle Harris in Halloween 5, like which one is which even? And given that the entity can take on multiple forms, I do kind of imagine they'll move on from the pale girl going forward. Maybe we'll see a possessed version of Sienna's cousin Gabby, or maybe a new demon entirely. In any event, it's clear that she left her mark on the fan base.
You inspired my daughter. She wants to dress up as the little pale girl next Halloween, so.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people dressing up for her this Halloween, and I love that.
There's one more thing that I want to address, which is the theory that Emily Crane is the daughter of the cat lady from the first Terrifier. This is something that I brought up in my art horror history. The first Terrifier has this character known in the credits as the cat lady, but she's really more of a doll lady who treats this baby doll as if it's her actual daughter.
This is my daughter, Emily. Say hello to the pretty young lady.
I had suggested that maybe she did have a daughter named Emily, but she died, and now she just takes care of this doll because her mind can't cope with the idea of losing her kid. But the more I think about it, the more this doesn't make sense. Emily Crane was 10 years old when she died, not a baby. The article also makes it sound like Emily Crane's parents are still together. So if that's the case, then where's the dad? And Emily Crane is a blonde, white-skinned girl, clearly not related to the Middle Eastern brunette cat lady. So I'm gonna call that one debunked. Let me know what you think in the comments, and what else you want to see in terms of Terrifier videos. Should I update Art the Clown with my new findings, or should I cover another character? Feel free to drop me a comment, and remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell, and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.